Good evening. I'm Peter Marsh, and welcome to Multicultural Inferences. On tonight's discussion, we are talking about the geopolitical stage and the effects of COVID-19. Not at all. Don't worry about that. What's up? I'm Anchor Pete. Don't worry. Tonight, we're talking about cartoons, and we're going to make some inferences about a bald guy being in a show where they have trick arrows. And I would not want to talk to anybody else in the world about that besides the man right next to me, my friend Brian. Brian, would you rather talk about geopolitical stuff?
No, but
Okay,
I just have to point out to anyone who's listening that I have no knowledge of these little intros that Pete does. And so my reactions to them, where I snort in the background, are completely genuine.
Yes. It's kind of like when you have that family member where it's almost like awkward roulette, where like you bring them to an event and you're worried they're going to embarrass you by saying some random shit, you know? So you never know what I'm going to say. I just blurt out random shit. But you take it like a champ. I appreciate it, man.
Oh, I think they're all great. So
Awesome. Cool. Well, we have once again a smorgasbord of stuff to talk about tonight. We are going to talk about Young Justice episode 8. We're going to talk about Hawkeye episode 3, and then we're going to talk about Masters of the Universe Revelation episodes 2 through 5. So if you like those shows in that order, then this is the show for you. Brian, right off the bat, Young Justice episode 8, we brought another story arc to a close. Did you like this resolution?
Yeah, I did like it. I thought it was a very personal, familial story, and I liked how it all panned out in the end.
Yeah. Spoilers for everything that we're going to discuss tonight. For Young Justice, this had one of the best animated fights I think I've seen.
Oh my God, yes. That fight was ridiculous. It was extended, and it was bloody.
Yes. Yeah. I sometimes get a kick out of the fact that they're like, oh, we're on HBO Max now, so we can do stuff we couldn't do on Cartoon Network. So you have like Lady Shiva cutting guys in half and
literally cut two ninjas in half with one swipe.
Yeah. And then she herself gets stabbed like right in the center too.
Yep. Yeah. And there's this pool of blood underneath her, which is, appropriate. I mean, Tiger's got a decent wound in her leg too, I mean, not that I watch these shows for like violence, but that was a very well choreographed and animated fight scene. Like it really stood out to me. Across this entire series, really.
Yes. With comics, with live action movies, and with cartoons, there's all different strengths for each medium. And sometimes people attempt things that work in one medium, they try it in another one. And I think that fight where it was like essentially in darkness, but you would have like Tigress's eyes were lit up, or Rictus's like kind of armor lit up.
Yep.
That's something I could easily see in a comic book, right? Like in the panels. And I just think that it worked well here. It just looks so cool. And I think like in live action, it would look well. It would look really good too.
Yeah, I think when you're trying to translate the action you see in cartoons or comics to live action, I think one of the other times it really works very well is when it's in the dark.
Yes.
You can't really tell exactly what's going on. So I think that's the best case scenario. And then when you have kind of more flashy, more colorful kind of things, like I keep going back to Cowboy Bebop. Like sometimes it just looks a little weird in live action.
Yeah. Still haven't gotten around to seeing it. But speaking of anime, don't you think that when Rictus is lit up like that in the dark and it's like that pink light, doesn't it kind of look like Majin Buu from Dragon Ball Z?
I can kind of see that, yeah.
Yeah. So this episode was interesting because it cut from this kind of big espionage, martial arts conclusion to this story on the Smallville farm, the Kent farm. And it was interesting because that was about family and losing a family member on the Kent farm. And then you had like family members essentially like coming together in this martial arts environment and like how they've kind of like influenced each other's lives. It was interesting to see how like the League of Shadows influenced both Artemis and Cheshire. And then like the two paths they've gone on. I just think that like it's really well done and really thought out.
Yeah, I agree, and I think the scenes in the Kent farm was a nice contrast. Like you mentioned, it's definitely all about family, and different aspects of it at this time. But I mean, it was a little heartbreaking to hear Superman talk to his son about why Uncle Connor wasn't coming this time. Although I think he will be coming back still, so it kind of helps soften that blow a little bit. But I mean, it's like, again, this show is so is very mature. It tackles these kind of subjects in a very mature, reasonable manner, and I greatly appreciate that as a old semi-balding man.
Yeah, and it's funny because like Superman, this is such a unique interpretation of Superman because he kind of seems, I don't want to use the word cowardly, but he always seems kind of timid. He kind of shies away from things. I mean, ever since Superboy has been around in Young Justice, he's been very awkward around him, or he doesn't want to interact with him. And even when his son, Jonathan, brought up Superboy's death, he kind of tensed up real quick. And so they of course, in different interpretations of Superman, like he can be awkward as Clark, but I think that they make him awkward as Superman too on this show.
Well, I mean, you have to really think about. I think that's actually a really interesting way to tackle it because you have to think about what Connor was. He was a clone of him. Like, how do you? He's a younger version of a clone of himself. Well, I mean, half clone. But
yeah,
how? Let's say you met a 20-year-old half clone of half you, half me, or something like that. Like, how the hell would you interact with it? You know?
I'd be like, "Oh, this is so hot. Is it incest if we do it?" We're 56 episodes in, everybody. Shit's getting off the rails.
Has it ever been on a rail?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, it's just like in a stream somewhere.
I know. So, like, but seriously, I think that's a very. I mean, it's a very impossible thing to have happen. But I think let's say a more real world equivalent would be like, let's say you met a child that you didn't know you had, and they were like half grown. Like, how would you react to them? It's hard. I mean, I don't want to get like too personal in this, but like I have a half sister, and sometimes like it's a weird thought to me that I have a half sister that I am 27 years older than.
Yes,
it's weird. It's a weird like it's hard to separate those kind of things. So I think it's a very understandable reaction that he has to Connor in general, and I really like that he addressed that he wished he did something differently.
Yeah, that's a very good metaphor that you used there. It's good because like the main heroes like Superman and Batman are always just so far removed from what's going on in the show for the most part, and it's just cool that when they come in, it's not this like, oh, they're so badass. It's like, no, we're dealing with them on a personal level, and we're seeing how the main characters influence them. That's really the heart of this show, and what's so good about the show is like these younger characters taking on the mantle. And a lot of times the younger characters are more like adult and like they're dealing with more than their Justice League counterparts, Yeah. Absolutely. So let's see. I'm just trying to think of what else I want to talk about. Here's the thing. I got to get this out of the way. I'm pretty sure that's Jason Todd.
Yeah.
Right?
I was going to say that they basically confirmed that last season. I mean, they didn't flat out say it, but he was fighting Nightwing and he said Grayson, and then Russell Gould was like, "Oh, your memory's coming back." So yeah, that's Jason Todd, and we've even commented, "Is that what happened to him?" That's what happened to him. He's there. So
yeah,
I mean, they reference him in the credits of last season as like Red Hooded Ninja. Can you get any more on the nose?
Right. Yeah. So I'm just trying to think because this episode was pretty straightforward. There wasn't any like big revelations or anything like that. It was called. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I have a couple slight things here. I mean, I don't know exactly why or when Ra's al Ghul kind of just changed his tune. For what reason, and if there's any ulterior motive there. I definitely think there's something going on because Talia does not seem too pleased. About new guests. Maybe she had some other intentions for what they do there, or I don't know. But there's something there to come back to, I think. But I mean, this is definitely a close to this arc overall.
Yeah, Well, speaking of Ra's al Ghul, and I think they call him Ra's al Ghul, right? In this,
Do they say Ray? Oh man, I go back and
yeah,
forth.
yeah, it's okay. I mean, the only reason I point that out is because like it matters in like what show or movie you watch. They call him Ra's. Sometimes they call him Ra's. In Batman the Animated Series, they called him Ra's al Ghul.
Yeah.
So I think that's what they're doing here too. But I was gonna say that this show is so dense with the mythology. I'm just trying to remember. He was on the light, right?
Yes.
With like Lex, and so like I'm also just trying to remember the light's like agenda. Like essentially, the light was trying to have some kind of like they were working with Vandal Savage to go against Darkseid. I can't.
That's a great question.
What's that?
I don't really remember either.
Yeah. I mean, luckily there's so many freaking episodes this season. We can kind of do some research and just kind of find out what the light's motivation is. But I know that it involves Darkseid. I just can't remember if they're like pro Darkseid or if they're against Darkseid. And
I think
I think all the stuff that happened with the Reach, right? Because that's the Reach is like the Blue Beetle people, right?
Yeah.
That whole thing was just like a little side, story. It wasn't like part of their plan, I don't think.
Yes.
Yeah. Shit. I bought some more comics, by the way, from that collectible store, and I wanted to show them to you. I totally forgot to do this, but I bought this one issue of The Outsiders, which had a team, and I'll show it next episode, but it had like Geoforce, Black Lightning, Looker, and then it also had
Katana,
Metamorpho, and then also had the girl who is Muslim on this show.
Oh, Halo.
And so Halo.
I almost said Dusk.
Oh, yeah. Well,
sorry, Dusk.
Dusk, yeah. But I was going to say that, like, it's interesting because the writers, like Weissman and the other guy, must, like, really be influenced by that Outsiders run. Because when I was looking through that comic, which was from, like, 1985, like, I was really thinking about this show. I'll show it next episode. But Halo is, like, this blonde, like, bubbly kind of girl. She's very positive, like she is on this show. But she's a white blonde girl, right? And then Looker is interesting because, like, I mean, we only saw Looker for like 5 seconds on that one episode, and she was kind of almost like a Jean Grey type. In the comic, she's more like a bombshell type where she's like flirting with guys and kind of manipulating guys. She still has mental powers, but she's kind of like who?
It's kind of like a double meaning. She's a real Looker.
Right. Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I'm trying to think of like a Marvel character where she's kind of like sexy and manipulates people, like maybe like Emma Frost kind of, but not as like high strung or I don't know. But
I'm blanking too though.
yeah. But it was just real interesting because like the Outsiders team was acting like the Outsiders team on Young Justice, and I know that Black Lightning was on Young Justice last season too. So like they seem to be very influenced by this comic, and it was good. I'll show it to you next time. But I like the deep dive stuff and using these characters that like I didn't even know about, and I've pretty much been like onto DC since like 1991 or so, and so like before that I'm I'm a little bit patchy.
Yeah, same thing for me. The 80s were I was a lot younger, and my comic book collecting was just the newsstand at the like the local grocery store, like the deli on the corner. Whatever was there, I occasionally got one. Like I didn't have many consecutive issues, but I had a whole bunch of random stuff.
What was your first comic that you ever bought? Do you remember?
I don't know, but I definitely had a few Batman and the Outsiders issues.
Oh, nice.
What? Yeah, I had some stuff from the 80s, but I didn't really get into it until the same around the same time as you, like very early 90s.
Yeah. And that's what I think is done so well in this show. And then we're going to talk about Hawkeye in a minute too, but like with the MCU is when they take these characters that they weren't in the forefront in the 90s or the early 2000s. They're the characters that are kind of the more diehard fans know about them, and they make them super interesting and compelling. I think that's what this show does a really great job with,
Absolutely.
Yeah. So the episode was entitled "I Know What the Caged Cat Sings," and that's from a Maya Angelou poem, I'm assuming.
So apparently that's incorrect. It's generally falsely accredited to Maya Angelou.
Oh shit! Okay.
Which I found out from the Wikipedia.
Okay.
I didn't know. I definitely wouldn't know something like that. Yes, the final quote comes from the novel "Dust Tracks on a Road" by Zora Neale Hurston.
I know that name.
Which credit? Yeah, I didn't know it either. I mean, I obviously know Maya Angelou, and I would have thought it was a good guess for a quote like that, but apparently it's wrong.
Yeah. Well, I like how they had a tigress theme or something like that in each of the titles for this little story arc, and I like that Artemis is reading or saying a quote each time they do the post-credit scene.
Yeah, and it's a nice segue into her civilian life where she's a professor. So
right. Yeah, it just elevates the material, man. It just makes it more mature. It's so good.
And I'm happy to have things like that, than the horribly depressing Miss Martian sobbing in the background.
Yeah. Right. And I think next time around we're getting the magic people, right? Like Zatanna, Clarence, the Witch Boy. Yeah.
Yes, the next episode will start a Zatanna arc. I'm very excited about it. We haven't really seen all that much of her in the show in the past. I mean, she's had some presence, but I don't think she's ever really gotten a major story. So this will be interesting to see.
Yeah, as far as Zatanna goes, one of the big parts of the show was that her dad, what the fuck?
Zatara.
Zatara, right? It's just like her name. It's just a little different. Yep. Zatara puts on the helmet of fate, and so she essentially loses her dad.
Yes, that's right.
That's a big thing. Yeah, and then there was that whole thing with Wally, Kid Flash and Dr. Fate too. That was really good too.
Yeah. The other interesting thing too is that most of my exposure to Zatanna is in the context of Constantine. So it's also going to be interesting to see. I mean, sometimes Batman too,
right?
But it'll be interesting to see that without that, because I don't think they've shown him in this universe, and I don't think they necessarily will.
Yeah, I don't know if they've shown John Constantine. I don't think so. I'm actually not a big fan of having John Constantine be a superhero and be in the regular DC universe. I'd much rather have him in Vertigo and removed. And I know Vertigo doesn't exist anymore, but I just don't like him messing with DC stuff.
Yeah, because they have to kind of dull him a little bit in a sense.
Yeah,
I think.
Yeah,
and I think as weird as this is, because we're talking about dark magic and stuff. Hellblazer was a lot more grounded.
Oh, so good. Yeah. Hellblazer is just one of my favorite comic book things ever. I just love it so much, and pretty much every one of my favorite writers has written Hellblazer at one point. Yeah, so good. Zatanna, though, for me, I have read a little bit of her stuff that wasn't with Constantine, and it was by Paul Dini, who worked on Batman the Animated Series, and she was on that too.
I mean, that was my first exposure to the character, was that Batman the Animated Series episode.
Yeah. So, I know that obviously Batman the Animated Series is an influence on the show, and I don't know. I actually, she's in my top 10 of my favorite DC characters, and I actually don't like that they kind of pair up with Constantine so much. I like her just kind of being her own thing. So, we'll see. Cool, man. All right, so with that being said, you ready to move to Hawkeye?
Do it.
Let's do it. Okay. Your favorite episode of the season so far?
I can't do it. It's too early.
Okay.
I mean, this many of the scenes here were taken directly from the Fraction run, so I would have to say this one off the top of my head, but I may have to do a deeper examination on that later on.
Yep. I thought it was the best episode of the season so far. I like the first episode a lot. I feel like this is definitely better than the second episode. That whole sequence where they're just driving in the car and they're shooting arrows at the tracksuit mafia guys. I was just eating that stuff up. So
yeah,
good.
It was fantastic, and I really like that they're throwing in the Hawkeye death angle, because I mean, that came into play in this Fraction Aha run that we've talked about before, but it wasn't until later on. I think it was like the third or fourth volume they started playing with that. But
Right.
Obviously, we only have 6 episodes to go through, so and it works because I think this Clint is perceived to be a little bit older than the Clint in that comic.
Yeah, right. And you are absolutely right when you're saying that, like, it was just like a lot of stuff taken directly from that comic, like just the way they were working together, like shooting and then, like, kind of saying things back and forth to each other. But it did add that extra level with the deafness too. And one of my favorite aspects with the whole deaf aspect of the story was when they're back in the apartment and you got like punk music playing, it's real loud, and it just gets silent for a second. You remember that?
Yeah.
And then, like, he gets a call from his son, and you can only barely hear the son. I thought that was some really great acting on Jeremy Renner's part and Haley Steinfeld, where like she's kind of almost like an interpreter for him.
Yeah, and some great sound design too. I mean, you heard that slight muffle sort of. I mean, I think they did a really good job of. I mean, I feel like even the music in general in this episode was a little lower than I'm used to. Like, I feel like when I watch things, there's an action scene, I have to lower the volume because my TV is just so goddamn loud. But when they're talking, I can't hear anything. I have to raise it up.
Yes.
I feel like the music in this was possibly purposely lower. I don't know. Maybe I could be totally crazy there though.
No, you might be onto something. I mean, like, I can relate to you with the whole music being loud and then like the talking being low, especially because we have little kids. So like when you're watching something at night, you don't want to wake them up. But then you're like, what the fuck are they saying? Like, you can't tell when they're like whispering stuff to each other.
You especially can't say that kind of reaction.
No, yeah. So this episode was directed by Bert and Bertie. Have you ever heard of them?
I do not know who they are.
Bert and Bertie are 2 women, and they are like a duo that make movies together. They made a thing called Troop Zero, which I think that was like some kind of like zombie, like field trip movie that was on Netflix. But it was kind of cool. Like, they had this like duo making this very fun, energetic episode. But it was also super emotional and good. Like all the stuff with Echo, I thought was really compelling too. Like the actor that played Echo's dad, Zahn McClarnon, right? I'm a big fan of him. He was like one of the bad guys on the 2nd season of Fargo. He was a character on Westworld. He was one of the robots, and he was in Doctor Sleep. And like that's some of my favorite stuff, and he's just great in all 3 of those.
Yeah, I have not seen him in anything. I don't think I made it to season 2 of Westworld, and I have not seen Doctor Sleep or Fargo. So
okay,
catch up on.
Doctor Sleep is pretty excellent, and Fargo. If you ever watch any of the videos with me and Danny on the Lastercast, I always bring up Fargo, and he's like, I gotta check that out. But yeah, so that's my favorite season too. Is season 2.
Got it.
Yeah, but it was weird that he was in the Tracksuit Mafia, right?
I don't know. Is it?
Well, I feel like the Tracksuit Mafia was kind of like just Russian guys.
Oh yes. Okay, yeah. Now I see the angle. Yeah, they did more seem like a Russian mob sort of thing, but I think they've shown some other things already, so I'm not too surprised here.
Yeah. Did you watch that video that I shared with it was Movie Bob, and he was speculating?
You mentioned it, but you actually didn't share, so I didn't know what you were talking about. So I actually
shit.
Because I hadn't watched the episode yet, but when you talked about it, so I don't think you shared it. But I just realized that right when you sent me the link for this. So yeah.
It's okay. Am I allowed to kind of do some spoilery speculation?
Is it about a certain uncle?
Yes.
Okay, let's do it.
So the speculation is that the uncle is Kingpin, Wilson Fisk. And like every time we watch this friggin' show, like on Twitter, it's always like trending Fisk, Kingpin. Just like it's always like Mephisto, when it's another show, right? So you're pretty sure that's Kingpin?
The street level Mephisto in terms of Marvel theorizing?
I guess so. But the reason why I shared that video, Movie Bob did a fantastic job. And he brought up that the Tracksuit Mafia was trying to get this watch. And I completely forgot about that watch.
Yes. Excellent point. Yeah.
He did like a freeze frame on the watch itself. And it had a number. It was like 268. And so he looked up like Avengers issue 268, and he looked up Uncanny X-Men issue 268. And he's thinking that, like, because it's Marvel and it's the MCU, that number is going to have significance.
Okay.
And the Uncanny X-Men 268 was an interesting issue because it had both Cap and Black Widow in it. And
is that the one where they're like standing on a rooftop and it's like Black Widow has the gray suit? That's a very famous.
Which has the short hair.
Yeah.
So that's that issue, and so he thinks that that's sort of a clue, and that issue also has to deal with time travel and Black Widow.
Okay, interesting.
Now, one other thing, and I'm just totally fucking plugging Movie Bob's site, but he was talking about how Wolverine's anniversary is coming up, like from his debut.
Yes.
He's like, his 50th anniversary is coming up, and so they think that there's going to be some kind of MCU thing about Wolverine to tie in with it. And Marvel has a thing right now in the comics. It's called The Deaths of Wolverine. Have you like seen any advertising for that?
Yeah, it's the X 10 lives and Deaths of Wolverine.
Yeah.
You have to play with that powers of X and the thing.
Yeah. Right. The 10. Yeah. And so with that, in that there's actually like an animated video that takes like the comic panels and they kind of move them around, and Wolverine's talking and he's talking about this special watch. So it's like Movie Bob's connection. I'm gonna stop talking about Movie Bob in a second, but he was saying that, like, you know, Kang is kind of the big bad right now. It's a watch, time travel. There's maybe something to that, you know.
Interesting. I mean, but this is such a street level show.
Yeah. Right.
I don't know how time travel can play in here. And I mean, even if you're roping in Cap and Black Widow, I mean, Black Widow is dead.
Right.
We do know that Yelena is supposed to show up in some capacity, and Cap's an old man. So, and I don't think either of those characters are going to come back at any point. So I don't know. I mean, but they definitely, there definitely could be something to that watch. Because they also in this episode mentioned that, was there anything else there? Somebody says to someone, is there anything else there that was important? It might have been important or something like that. So yeah, there's something more to that auction than just having that Ronin costume there.
Yeah.
That's
in that auction, there's a Triceratops like skeleton, right?
Yeah.
In that auction. And they're like, oh, don't ask where we got that from. And so like, that could be like three things, right? Could be just be they stole from a museum. Who gives a shit, right? The other thing is that like there's the Savage Land in the MCU, right? And then the third thing is something to do with time travel, right?
Yeah.
I am 100% in agreement with you that there's probably no time travel in this show, anything like that, unless there's some kind of like post-credit scene that like is like, oh, there's Kang somehow, right? Some kind of bullshit like that. But I'm thinking that maybe the watch has significance. And that maybe that's how we get Black Widow's sister kind of involved. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe. Or it just could be. I mean, thinking about the potential of how an end credit cliffhanger stinger could go. I mean, I think the only thing that's going to fit is something like Kingpin or some street level Daredevil, Kingpin, something like that.
Yeah.
I mean, Echo being on the show, you know, originally starting off as an enforcer for Kingpin, as a Daredevil villain. It could do something to do with that. It just could be more of Echo and showing what her show is going to be about. So we know she has a show coming.
That's true. I did say I wasn't going to bring up any more Movie Bob, but he was saying that he thinks that like, Julianne, what the fuck? Elaine. Right, from Seinfeld.
Julia Louis-Dreyfus.
Right. Her character, the Countess, right, was that she was going to maybe show up at some point and like recruit Swordsman. What is it?
Swordsman.
I'm so lucky I have you on the show, man. I just like just butcher names, just forget fucking Julia Louis-Dreyfus. There's one thing that we brought up last time that I think you didn't really want to spoil for people, but I think it's okay since we're like speculating so much, right?
Yeah.
Like, I think you didn't want to bring up that Swordsman could be a good guy, right?
Oh no, I think I flat out did say that. Didn't I?
Okay.
I feel like it's a red herring. I mean, like I asked who the villain was, and I said
Yeah.
that there was the presence of Echo and the presence of a person higher up than that, shows maybe Kingpin. We know that her mom is a villainous character in the comics and actually is a vampire. I double checked that she actually is a vampire. I do not think. I don't think that will come into play here because that would be a little weird. Maybe not because we're gonna have Blade soon. I mean, why the hell not?
That's another post credit.
Do it. Bring in vampires.
Yeah, come on. We got 3 episodes left. We could do like 2 post credits each episode. Yeah, Blade, Kang, Kingpin.
Yeah, we'll have another voiceover from Blade, and then just like Eternals, and then that'll be good.
Perfect. They'll be in the Savage Land.
Going here? Oh yeah, the villain. So I mean, is the villain one of the two of those? Is it Swordsman? I feel like they're framing Swordsman as someone that is very suspicious, but is not the one at the behind all of it.
I agree.
But
I think
but Julie, the Contessa, or whatever the hell her name is too long.
She's got like 4 names.
Her recruiting Swordsman sounds like an interesting idea, although I'm not sure that character has as much of an impact as the other 2 people.
Yeah.
Like U.S. Agent and Yelena. I feel like they have a little more gravitas, I guess.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. Obviously the idea is that she's building like a Dark Avengers, right? And one thing that was real interesting about this episode is it ends on like a cliffhanger where Duquesne has got his sword right at Barton's throat, right?
Yeah.
And the thing is, they cut. There's no like reaction. No one says anything to each other, right? He's like, "What are you doing here?" I think he says. And so you could totally have it to where they know each other next episode.
Yes. And again, in the comics, Swordsman was the one that trains or kind of even raises a Clint in a way. So, and I don't think that could be possible here, based on the ages of the actors. So, now this is something, I don't know if I talked about this last time or I just had this thought in my head afterwards, but there's another character in the comic series that shows up that I didn't really know about until this comic series, and that's Barney Barton. And I'm wondering if they're going to kind of combine those 2 characters into something together.
Right. Because there's 2 versions of the Dark Avengers, right? One version has Bullseye becoming Hawkeye. This sounds so stupid that I'm saying this out loud. Bullseye becomes Hawkeye, but then the second version of the Dark Avengers has him, right? Has Hawkeye's brother.
I don't remember that, but I'll take your word for it.
Yeah,
I don't remember Barney showing up anywhere outside of that Fraction AHA run.
Okay,
but I could be wrong there.
I think because I think after Fraction's run there was Jeff Lemire did Hawkeye, right? Yeah, and that's where you see Swordsman, the whole background with Swordsman in the modern day. You see that kind of stuff in that run. I think the brother's in that too, but I might be wrong.
Yeah, no, I think you're right there. But I'm kind of thinking that maybe there's some kind of combination of the 2 of those characters in some way.
I see what you're saying.
Maybe they train together under the same person, and it's kind of like a fake brother sort of thing.
Right. Yes, that's kind of what I was thinking too. That like they weren't necessarily like mentor and mentee; it was like peers, right? I think you're right. Yeah. So for this episode too, right? You have this whole thing with Echo, and then you also have Kazi, right? Who we know is going to be Clown at some point. And it was interesting because like he knows how to sign, she's signing, and you have her backstory. And what else is interesting is that Hawkeye's not telling Kate Bishop that he was Ronin.
Yeah.
So it's like they're kind of like building it up that he doesn't want people to know that he's Ronin. And I think he's eventually going to have to admit it to her. And that's probably going to be like in the second to last episode, right?
Yes, I agree.
Yeah. And so that I felt like that's because you have this kind of goofy stuff. Then you have the stuff where his hearing aid is gone and there's some emotional stuff there. And then you have Echo's story and her dynamic with the tracksuit mafia. And I just felt like the tone kind of goes back and forth between like silly and goofy, but then also like real serious. And the comic for the most part is kind of funny and quirky. It's not super serious, but there are a couple of super serious moments.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. But what I was gonna say was I really like the stuff with Echo, like her origin story. Is she missing a leg or part of a leg in the comics? I don't think so, right?
I don't believe so. I think that was something for that. I was curious if that was the actress or something they just added to the character or not. I want to look that up.
Yeah. I didn't think that she had that, but I really liked her. I liked the fact that she was just using sign language and they had subtitles for when she was signing. She kind of seemed threatening and you could empathize with her, especially when they showed her as a kid at first and then they showed her, as an adult, she saw her dad die. So I'm all on board. I'm all on board for watching a show with her.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, I would wonder what it's about.
Yeah.
I have no inkling on an idea what it could be about. But I'm gonna watch it. Of course, I'm gonna watch it.
Yeah. It's so interesting because with all these Marvel, these MCU things, it's always like the Avengers stuff kind of activates everything. And, like Spider-Man kind of becomes who he is because of Iron Man. And like so many of the villains are because of Iron Man, right? And they try to do street level stuff with the Netflix shows, but they've basically said that doesn't count. And so now they're making it kind of like Ronin essentially really stirred up the underworld in New York. And so it's like they're like really introducing that New York underworld. And I think that we're really going to get that fleshed out in Echo and then in Moon Knight too, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Moon Knight is almost like a forgotten aspect of like the New York street level scene. But I mean, he's definitely a part of it.
Yeah. Is there any other street level people coming in like either the shows or the movies? No, right? I mean, Spider-Man is street level. I mean,
he's staying in movies, and I have some comments to make about Spider-Man 2 later if we have time.
Yeah, of course.
Maybe before we jump into Masters of the Universe.
I agree.
Yeah, I mean, they basically have the rights to all the characters back. I think the only ones that they don't exclusively have the rights to are Hulk and Spider-Man.
Okay.
But they reverted on all the ones that are on the Netflix shows, including Punisher. I don't think they announced anything for Punisher, but that would be the only thing I could think of that could be coming.
Yeah.
Sometimes I almost think of She-Hulk as street level.
Right.
Because I don't know. So.
Rightfully so, because she's like a lawyer in New York. A lot of her stories like just take place in New York City, and she's like dealing with criminals in New York. Yeah.
I mean, it's weird that I would almost consider She-Hulk more street level than like Miss Marvel.
Yeah.
Almost.
Right. Who knows? Maybe they'll bring the Charlie Cox Daredevil in eventually down the road too. Like.
I mean, there are rumors of it. It's hard because so many people just want to create. Oh God, I hate them saying these fake news, but it's true. I've seen so many goddamn mock logos of Daredevil that looks a little different from the Netflix one that has MCU kind of tint to it.
Yeah.
And there are persistent rumors, especially based on the potential cameo in Spider-Man. And again, I still think there's no way that Vincent D'Onofrio just happened to tweet about this show for no reason. I mean, if he did, that's like epic trolling, like epic level of trolling on like a level of Gail Simone is on a daily basis,
Right.
Expert level.
Yes. I hope that he's on it. The thing is that whole like underworld crime aspect. What makes that work so good in Marvel, the heroes are all excellent, but the villains are really good too. And the Kingpin is so crucial to that. Obviously he's the head of the New York crime, right? But then you also have the Owl, and the Owl is great. You have Hammerhead. You really got to bring in these guys that are just these great ground level guys. And I've always said that for like Young Justice, that's my favorite part of DC is like the kind of the assassin ninja espionage stuff. And then for Marvel, I love all the espionage like S.H.I.E.L.D., Black Widow, Winter Soldier stuff. but I also love the street level stuff so much. So good.
Absolutely.
You know? And we got so much of that in this episode. That's why I was a big fan of this episode. What did you have to say about Spider-Man?
Oh, there was the comments by the head of Sony Pictures, Amy Pascal, about how they're going to make another Spider-Man trilogy, and I don't always take what she says at face value because she seems a little out there. But somebody put the idea in my head. Some article somewhere put the idea in my head that she's doing that to pressure Marvel into whatever deal they're working out currently.
Right.
What she does is she's leaking information, seeming like a crazy person, and that's putting pressure based on fan reaction for, to get whatever deal done more so in Sony's favor than Marvel's, because they know they kind of need it. Not that they need it, but it would be really bad if they didn't have it.
Right. I think we kind of saw that when they were doing the negotiations that last time, right? Where they were going to pull Spider-Man out. Yep. Right. She started to kind of drop stuff, and you'd see those press conferences where she's sitting right next to Kevin Feige, right?
And he looks real stressed out.
Right. So I think you're right. I think she's maybe kind of being a little manipulative there, but I mean, we're kind of benefiting from it, right?
Absolutely. So keep doing it.
Yes. I'm all down for some more Tom Holland Spider-Man. I know that you and I kind of talked about we want Spider-Man in the MCU. You can't have the Fantastic Four come in, the X-Men, and then not have Spider-Man.
Yeah, but at the same time, I still want a Spider-Man world. We don't have that really.
No.
I need we don't have the real criminal side of Spider-Man, the Spider-Man world yet. I mean, we've had some one-off villains, but like you said, the connecting street level, all the gangs, all that, we need that. We need all that involved.
Yes. So who knows? I mean, things are looking pretty good for Marvel right now. There hasn't been a dud. I know people have things to say about Eternals, but for the most part, I've yet to be disappointed, and it's been like a freaking decade. So
yep, crazy.
So why don't we talk about something that is a little bit more contentious and where some people have some real issues with it?
Let's do it.
Yeah. So Masters of the Universe Revelation. We covered episode 1 last time. We're going to cover 2 through 5. We're going to spoil the shit out of this Netflix show. Did you like the first season better than the second season?
Yes.
Okay, me too.
Yeah. I think the first season, although it was only 5 episodes also, right?
Right.
For some reason, I felt the first season was paced better.
Yeah.
I mean, this season, this part of season, whatever you want to call it, definitely has moments, but I felt there were more blunders here.
Oh yeah.
In this second half than in the beginning. Although one of my absolute favorite things in this entire thing was there's a point when He-Man is fighting Skeletor, and He-Man yells out, "It's not about us," which is just like a big middle finger to all the people.
Right.
We're complaining about the first part. I definitely like the first part a lot better. I think I was much more invested in it. I think they made some odd choices, or not odd choices, but rushed choices in this.
Okay.
And one odd choice. The rushed choices is Teal as the sorceress. I get that, but it's rushed. It's absolutely rushed. Teela was built as this purely physical, skilled, trained character, and now suddenly they're just, her mom was a sorceress, so she's a sorceress now too, and it's and she's battling Evelyn, which great character turn, honestly, and who is basically an Evelyn who's trained her entire life basically.
Right.
But she's just gonna go in the magic water, and she knows how to do everything already, and everything's great.
Right.
Right.
It's kind of like a metaphor for what you're talking about is like with Lord of the Rings. Like, let's say there was Aragorn, right, who's like this fighter, right? He becomes a king, but he's this awesome fighter. And Gandalf gets killed, and then Aragorn's like, okay, well, now I'm going to be Gandalf, and I'm going to fight Saruman, right?
Yeah, exactly, yeah. I kept thinking back to the Thundercat reboot. what was it, 2009, something around that.
Sounds right, yeah.
Or how all the episodes were this connecting journey of kind of like Lion-O growing up, sort of. Which was the opposite of the original cartoon where he, was a 12-year-old in a 20-year-old's body or whatever because he, his capsule malfunctioned or whatever.
Right.
I think they would have better served that change if they would have brought it up earlier and had her working towards it earlier.
Yes.
And I think it would have felt a little better about that. But I like the parallels of matching up, obviously He-Man and Skeletor, and then Teela and Evil Lynn battling towards the end. Like it was a nice thing, and really there were underused characters in the original series. There were definitely more side characters, and even though they were there a lot more than some of the others, but I liked that they were fighting, and then that He-Man and Skeletor were fighting kind of more in the background, I say.
Yeah. You mentioned how this was kind of like a middle finger, or that one line with He-Man and Skeletor fighting was like a middle finger. But I feel like I think that they made this complete story and that they didn't like radically change things for these 5 episodes. I think it's all just they made it and they just had to animate it all. But I think that the fans, I actually haven't seen the reaction. I think the fans that were upset probably like just gave up on it and haven't even tuned in.
I've seen nothing about this at all since it came out.
Right. But to me, it's like those people that were complaining so much that first season about like Teela and like her haircut and how she was all muscular. Like if they saw Evil Lynn, they'd be like, oh, Jesus Christ, with her abs and stuff. I mean, Sherry even kind of said something about her, when she walked by. But with that whole Evil Lynn sequence, they did her backstory really well, and it made sense that she would try to take that power from Skeletor. But I don't know. I like whenever a character gets so powerful that they can like literally just move their hand and like someone will die, or like they can.
Oh yeah, she moves her hand and destroys all of Preternia, but yet she's still having a fist fight with He-Man and Skeletor. It's absolutely ridiculous. And when you get to these things on this cosmic scale, it's like it's impossible to have a battle, a satisfyingly visual battle with the powers on that level. So they went too far with it. But I understand why they needed to. I mean, the show is called Masters of the Universe. And I never felt that that title applied. It just seemed like a space fantasy show to me as a cartoon. So I think that was a good angle to take, but they're delivering you a fight that doesn't necessarily make sense in the same context. Right.
You are 1,000% on the money. That's the whole thing. It's like you have the battle. And it's like, oh, she's kicking and punching and sword fighting, even though she just literally just blew up heaven, Like, okay. And what I don't like about that, too, is that you've had like 3 moments, at least in this season, where a character is like, I have the most power ever. But then it's like, no, I have the most power ever. And then another part is, well, I have the most power, but then the planets have to come into alignment, and then I'm going to control all of existence. It's like you just keep raising the scales. And, it's just like, oh, you're just raising the scale so that you can be defeated, essentially. Like, I want to see.
Go ahead. No, I was going to say that it just seemed like when everyone's getting all this more power, that no one lost any power either. So it was just like, there's just always more power to go around, it seemed.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, like, she destroys heaven. And I guess that, Preternia, and it's restored by the end, but it just kind of felt like there was no consequences.
Wait,
like
was it?
Orko come back.
Was it restored? I don't think it was.
Oh shit! Really? I mean,
I think heaven is like the people in heaven are dead.
Oh shit! Okay, all right, never mind. But then they still have Subternia.
I guess. I mean, that she didn't destroy that.
So you can go to like scary limbo if you die, but you can't go to heaven.
I guess.
That sucks.
Yeah. Well, He-Man wasn't going there anyway because he gave up his shot because he came back. So I mean, that's probably why there's like, okay, we don't need those people anymore.
Oh.
And then poor Moss Man, it's burnt to a crisp twice.
Yeah. And Fisto and Slapjap or whatever the fuck, Clamp Champ. Yeah. Did you know that Clamp Champ was voiced by Method Man?
No way.
Yes.
There were some interesting voices here. First of all, I never expected in my life that I would get emotional on the appearance of Ram Man, but that was that was Danny Trejo.
Yes.
Which I didn't. I mean, I never would have thought that, but I'm like, hey, that's awesome.
Yeah, and he threw one of those flying discs from the Masters of the Universe movie.
Yes. I mean, speaking of the Masters of the Universe movie, they had the guy with the blades. I think his name might have been Blades.
His name is Blade.
The little like pig-looking guy too, both from the movie. That was really cool.
Oh, that was actually one of my favorite parts. That part where they're fighting in the little catacombs. Yeah. Because I knew it was Kevin Smith's voice. He played both of those characters, Goat Man and Pig Boy. You know. And then Man at Arms is like, oh, we're at the bottom of the barrel here. And Kevin Smith's like, we don't do puns. And that was really fucking funny, you know? Yeah.
Another line I really got a kick out of, and maybe this was a little too on the nose, but Alicia Silverstone voices Queen Marlena, and she had the as if line, which I mean, I don't know. It's really out of character, really takes it kind of like out of but I laughed at it. I laughed very hard at it.
I didn't even know that was her until I looked up the credits. But yeah, that's crazy. What do you call it? Diedrich Bader was King Randor, her husband, right? And
yes,
he's Batman, isn't he, on that Harley Quinn show?
Is he Batman in that show? He was. I think he was Batman in something else prior.
Maybe Batman, Brave and the Bold. Okay, yeah. But, there's that sort of that crossover because Masters of the Universe is owned by DC and, Kevin Smith is like a big DC guy. Yeah. So you get that kind of crossover. And then I think Tony Todd was Scareglow again.
Yes, he was Scareglow. Yeah, he was in the first part of the season. So
Right. And then and then Ralph Garman played Fisto. And he's one of those guys that's on one of Kevin Smith's podcasts. Like Kevin Smith has – one of his shows is Hollywood Babble-On, and he's from that.
Yeah.
And he had that fucking beautiful line, like, oh, I'd fist him, right?
Oh, boy.
Yeah, people have issues with Kevin Smith, and they feel like he changed this show to kind of fit an agenda. And some people don't like Kevin Smith. I actually kind of like Kevin Smith. I get a little tired of, him crying about things often, I know he genuinely feels it, but it just seems like excessive, But I know that he loves the stuff the way that we love the stuff. I'm sure he loves He-Man.
Yeah, absolutely. I have mixed opinions on Kevin Smith. I like some of his stuff, but I'm not a diehard Kevin Smith fan.
Right.
But and I think there's definitely those little highlights of that juvenile humor that he's so good with. With the Fisto line and things like that. There's one thing though that I said was really awkward and weird, and I'm sure you know where I'm going with this.
Oh yes,
the Evelyn and Skeletor scene.
Evelyn lap dance.
Wow, I didn't need that at all.
Nope. That was weird. I felt very awkward watching that. In my
very
bedroom.
Awkward.
I was like, please don't let my children come in right now. And
that's what always happens too. Someone always walks in at the weirdest parts.
Yeah. I think that if my wife came in right there, she'd be like, we're going to counseling. You're like, there's something wrong here. Just fucking Mark Hamill with his Skeletor voice and his fucking skull face getting a lap dance from Evelyn. Oh, yeah.
God. It was a little strange. And also, it was just a weird, rushed way of doing that turn. The whole time, I saw that Evelyn kind of had the epiphany about what she's going to do, and I thought she was going to help the good guys.
Yeah,
right? But no, and I think it made for a decent conflict, but everything felt very rushed.
Yeah,
and it should have been over a slightly longer, maybe even an episode or two or something. I don't know, something about it felt too crammed in on this part.
Yeah, I agree. Going back to what you said very early on, you were saying that Teela felt very rushed. One thing they could have done if they added extra episodes, like you were saying, is that when the magic disappeared, maybe she could have become more focused on learning magic and doing magical things to kind of show her going down this path. But it is very sudden, and everything's very sudden. She gets the sword, and then at the very end, He-Man gets the sword. It's all like real just quick versus like, and it all kind of just feels like one big drawn out episode, like the last 3 episodes, you know?
Yeah. Yes.
But I was gonna say that for me, I watched She-Ra, the new Netflix version. Did you watch that?
We watched a few episodes in the first season, but we trailed off for whatever reason, and not because it wasn't good. I did enjoy it. I hear it is actually excellent. I really want to go back and watch that.
I think it's well done. One of the benefits of having 2 little girls is that like you can kind of just get into things that like you might be like, oh, it's girl stuff. Like My Little Pony was really excellent, and my daughter Pepper would watch it, and it was really good. And then the She-Ra show was really good, but you can tell it's definitely made for girls, and but I kind of felt like the She-Ra show was actually better than this. But with this at the very end, they kind of alluded that Hordak might be involved, right?
Yes. I definitely think that the ending was interesting. I wasn't sure if, when you're dealing with an end fight that has, existence at its core. Yeah. I don't know where you go from that, but I mean, I guess you got Hordak still. So, Skeletor goes back to Triclops and the Motherboard cult. And I don't think Motherboard was the thing, Brian. I think that is something new here.
Yeah, I agree.
And we see Skeletor get injected. It's going to turn into one of those like cyber zombie kind of things. But I saw some people speculating. I wonder if he's going to look like he looked in the New Adventures of He-Man. It would be interesting because that was a little more spacey,
right,
and technological. And then you see that statue or totem kind of transform into a humanoid form, which felt very anime to me. It looked very anime. Ghost in the Shell or something like that. Something forming. And then you see the horde symbol at the top of it at the end there. So it definitely could be something more. Will it get made? Based on the fact that I've seen no talk of this second half of the season, I'm assuming it won't.
Yeah.
And again, I'm going back to Cowboy Bebop again. I apologize.
No, it's okay.
I'm mixed on that show, and I'm mixed on this show, but and I would say I'm a little less mixed on Master of the Universe. I did like it overall. I just think it stumbled a little bit towards the end. Yeah. I don't think it necessarily needs a second season. But Cowboy Bebop stumbled a little more, but did some good things. But I absolutely have to know what happens after that. So I would want that to have a second season, but I would be okay with Masters of the Universe not having a second season. Because I think they did a complete enough story, that's a satisfying enough story to round everything out.
Yeah. I actually would not want them to have a second season. I feel like you're done with all the He-Man stuff. If anything, if they were able to do some kind of like She-Ra He-Man crossover, and maybe it was like done in a third type of animation style, because this animation style is very different from the She-Ra Netflix animation. And I'm assuming it's 2 different studios, and they probably aren't even like in communication with each other. But if you could kind of get it together where it's one show and have them like cross over, I think that would be really awesome.
I think the best you get was maybe you get this art style with maybe some of the voices from that other show.
Right. And there's one thing about this He-Man, it's the idea that this is a continuation of the 80s cartoon, whereas like She-Ra, that's not a continuation of the 80s She-Ra cartoon. It's like a reboot. So I don't know how they would kind of make that work story-wise. Well, She-Ra actually has this whole aspect in it where reality gets fucking changed too. And remember that happens in Voltron too, where like reality gets destroyed. It happens too much in these 80s reboots and stuff, you know? But I don't know. I actually really enjoyed it too. And I think Kevin Smith did a good job. And I think it was a good like follow-up to something that, obviously we just enjoyed 20 or 30 something years ago at this point. Yeah. So I think, so next week 40? We just have
40,
right? Because
doesn't matter.
Yeah. But next week we just have Hawkeye and Young Justice, right?
And something else we're gonna add an entire season of, probably no.
Oh God, no, I can't take it. But we do have Spider-Man coming. What's that?
Cram more TV and Pete.
I can't. My family will abandon me. But no, we will watch Spider-Man when it comes out. You already got tickets, right?
Yes.
Okay, so we got that coming, and so yeah, that's pretty much it for tonight then. So as always, man, thank you so much, and we will see you guys